Hi everyone, I'm Angie Hawkins. I'm an inner glow coach. I transform women to stop dimming their light to be loved, to radiating love so fierce that the world can't help to reflect it back. I am also the author and speaker of Running in Slippers, which is a raw and vulnerable memoir about a total train wreck period of my life, and it's extremely vulnerable. And the reason I wrote it that way is because life is really hard, and I don't think we talk enough about the shitty things that happen to us. So the whole purpose of the book is to encourage connection through vulnerability, which leads me to the purpose of today's video. I recently went on a trip to Spain and Morocco that turned out to be one of the hardest experiences I've had in a long time. So over the course of a few videos, because I think this will take more than one, I will be sharing the lessons and stories that came out of it. And the intent is to not rehash the trauma, but to explore the human experience of when life doesn't go the way we planned. Because sometimes the most beautiful growth hides inside the messiest moments. So even though this is a personal narrative of my specific story about this trip, no matter where you live or where you traveled or what you're going through right now, I think you will find a piece of my story relatable to something that's happened to you. And I share my lessons so that you don't have to repeat some of the same mistakes if this comes up in your life. So I'll start from the very beginning. Spain and Morocco has been on my travel bucket list for honestly over 20 years, because in the early 2000s, I used to love watching Rick Steves Travels Europe. And there was one episode in particular where he went to Spain, but then he took the ferry over the Strait of Gibraltar into Morocco. And this was fascinating to me because at that time, I was almost fluent in Spanish, so it was a dream of mine to actually go to Spain and speak Spanish in the wild. But this also became my fascination with Morocco because he went to the markets, and it was just this different, fascinating place that I had never seen or experienced before. Because again, this is the early 2000s, so it was before social media and other outlets to see all these other places in the world. And then later on in my adult life, I took a DNA test and I found out that I'm 12% Moroccan. So that just fueled my intensity for wanting to go to Morocco at some point. And then, because I lived in Chicago for a long time, so Spain and Morocco was actually a feasible trip. But then I moved to Hawaii, so then Spain and Morocco was halfway around the world. So I started exploring Asia and Australia and all these other places, and it just kept getting moved further down on my bucket list. Well, over the past few years, I've been going to these surf retreats because I started surfing during COVID because the ocean was the only thing that was opened. And in surfing, it's a very hard sport. I struggled a lot at the beginning, but I discovered a surf mentor, and her surf retreats totally changed my surfing progress because the way she explained surfing is something that my brain can wrap its head around. And so going to her retreats really up-leveled my surfing progress. So I had been going to several of these retreats anyway, most of them in Indonesia, one in the Philippines, but then this year they announced that they were doing a surf retreat in Morocco. So this was amazing news because, again, I had wanted to go to Morocco for so long, and then also it was aligned with my goal of going to a retreat and getting better at surfing. So the problem was, at the time I decided to take this trip, I was also in the process of deciding to leave my corporate job and start my own Inner Glow coaching business. So I was also leaving the security of a nice, healthy paycheck. But I don't know. I think I just wanted to YOLO, because I don't even know if we still use that word, but I had never done that, and it just felt aligned with starting a new journey. So I paid for most of the trip before I quit my corporate job, and it just felt aligned with starting a new chapter. Well, so anyway, I planned a leg into Spain. I planned the entire journey to take the ferry into Morocco. So I will begin the story with when I was getting ready to leave my home, meaning I carry on, so I don't use luggage. I have a backpack and then I have a purse. So everything was packed. I had my backpack on, I had my purse on. I had just ordered my Uber on my phone. And all of a sudden, I just felt a deep feeling of dread in my chest. Like, this is not good. It just didn't feel right. And I'm very intuitive, and I used to ignore my intuition. I normally don't dismiss it anymore, but I was literally walking out the door and my Uber was on the way. So it was, and again, most of the trip was already paid for, except for I think 2 of my hotels. So it was like, what am I supposed to do? Not go on this trip? So I ignored my intuition and I got on the Uber. I went on the airport and everything was fine in the beginning. So it was a 3-leg trip to get to my first destination of Mallorca, Spain. And I chose Mallorca because I was doing some research on Spain and everyone said like Barcelona and the coast of Spain, because I'm a beach person, so I wanted it to be on the coast. They said it was overcrowded and like Ibiza and Mallorca were better places. And being an island person, I felt like Mallorca just aligned with me more naturally anyway. So I chose Mallorca, Spain, and to get there, it was a 24-hour journey, 3 legs of 1 Honolulu to San Francisco to Frankfurt, Germany, and then Frankfurt to Mallorca. So Honolulu to San Francisco went fine. And in San Francisco, we boarded the plane. And just as soon as we had finished boarding, a flight attendant got on and was like, grab your stuff, we're deplaning right now. Like, it was just very abrupt and sudden. And as we were deplaning, I overheard one of the flight attendants say to someone, we do not want to take this aircraft. So it was obviously a mechanical issue, but they never really announced it. And they also started sending us a bunch of text updates, like they gave us meal vouchers. They were like, we identified a new aircraft. It's landing at X time, which was 2 hours later, which I thought was pretty impressive that they were able to find a new aircraft that quickly, considering it was a very unexpected emergency. But anyway, they never really announced the reason why. But right before I was getting ready to go get food, I overheard one of the other passengers talking about the reason why, but I couldn't make it all out. But I was really nosy and wanted to know. So I approached him and I was like, oh, excuse me, I heard you talking about the reason why we are delayed. You know, what was the reason? It's because the baggage guys crashed their cart into the plane and ruined the plane. So this is like such a freak accident. Like, what are the chances of this happening, right? And I was kind of nervous because I only had an hour-and-a-half layover in Germany for my flight to Spain, but I tend to be an anxious person, and the flight from San Francisco to Germany is 11 hours, so I was like, I can't be anxious for a 2-hour layover here, plus another 11 hours, so I'll just worry about it when I get there. So in San Francisco, there was an omen because in the women's bathrooms, in the stalls, there's these signs. The heading is, are you okay? And then the body is basically about sex trafficking, to make sure like what to do if you think you're being sex trafficked or whatever. But I read the are you okay? And I did have some feelings of anxiety because I may miss my next flight. Things aren't going as planned, but I kept telling myself, I kept stuffing the feelings of disappointment down, and I'm like, I'm okay, everything's okay. And I was just not feeling my feelings, basically. So anyway, the plane does come 2 hours later. We successfully board and take off. However, we landed in Germany at the exact same time that my flight to Mallorca was leaving. And as we were deplaning, they made an announcement, hey, if you had a connecting flight, go to gate Z18 and they'll issue your new boarding pass, because apparently all of us who had connecting flights had missed our flights. So luckily the line at the gate was not very long. I was able to be one of the first people who got there, and it was turning over really quick. So I'm thinking like, okay, I just walk up to her, she's gonna give me my new boarding pass and I can get on with my day. So it's my turn to go, and she asked me, oh, what is your name and what is your next destination? And I said, Angie Hawkins, Mallorca, Spain. And she starts rifling through her papers and she goes, oh, yeah. And I was like, and I said this out loud, I was like, oh, I can tell this is not good news. And she gave me a half-hearted smile as she pulls out her papers, and what she had to give me was my new boarding pass, which was for the next flight out, which wasn't until 10 a.m. the next morning. So this would be disappointing anyway, because it's 4 p.m. and I was not planning to spend the rest of the afternoon and overnight in Germany. But not only that, I only had a day and a half in Spain to begin with. So this cut into my time so much that I was only there for less than a day. But they did also provide me a hotel voucher and food vouchers, but it still just wasn't enough, because I was feeling super disappointed, because I was really excited to going to Mallorca. I even had a day trip planned with this tour company to tour the hidden beaches. So I was feeling super disappointed. But I was like, I'm not gonna let this get me down, because it was just the beginning of my trip and I didn't want to like have these like bad negative vibes infect the rest of my trip. So I was like, I can do this, I'm the strong one, I got this, I'm not gonna let this get me down. So I checked into my hotel at the Sheraton, and it didn't even occur to me, because I was so frazzled by what was going on. When I checked in, I just handed them the voucher. I didn't even think to upgrade my room. So of course I have like the shittiest room they have. So this is an airport hotel to begin with, and it's like the shittiest room they have. So it's 2 twin beds that I can't even push together because they're affixed to the floor. But I'm like, whatever, I just need to shower and eat, because I had, the Honolulu to San Francisco leg was 5 hours, then there was 2 hours in the airport, then 11 more hours. So my first concern was getting something to eat. So I went to the restaurant in the hotel, which felt very stereotypically German. Like it felt like, you know how Americanized things are like so over the top that they're not even authentic? That's how this restaurant felt. And I was like, is this just for the tourist experience? Because technically I had left the hotel, but it still had like an airport vibe of being like over the top. So even though I was in Germany and left the airport, I like still had this weird feeling of like not even being in Germany. So that was weird. And then when I was in the restaurant and I'm eating dinner, and I'm alone, which, I've eaten in restaurants alone, so that part didn't bother me. But the disconnect was everyone else in the restaurant just seemed like so happy and cheerful. And I was just sitting there and I felt honestly numb, because part of me was still really excited about my trip because I hadn't been to Spain or Morocco yet. But then there was this other part of me that was still feeling really disappointed because it was the beginning of the trip, things weren't working out, and I was gonna miss the tour in Spain, and at the restaurant I was texting the guy to let him know I had to cancel my ticket, and he was really cool about it, and he didn't, even though it was less than 24 hours, he didn't charge me or anything, he canceled it. But I still was stuffing down the feelings of disappointment. And I went back to my room, I took a shower, and there were two things about this room in the hotel. Number one, the last time I was in Europe was in 1997, and we went to Italy. I was in high school, and our plane, there were mechanical issues, and the next available flight wasn't until 24 hours later. So we had to spend the night at the Hilton at O'Hare Airport in Chicago. And so this room was eerily familiar to that room in 1997 at the Hilton O'Hare. And again, this is only the second time I've been to Europe. So I just had this feeling like, I don't think I'm meant to travel Europe for whatever reason. And the other thing about this room is I kind of have twin bed trauma because my mom's guest room in her home, and if you know anything about me, I won't get too much into it here, I have a very strained relationship with my mother, and I actually haven't even talked to her in 3 years. But her guest room in her home has a twin bed, and my mom's home is always freezing. So here I am in Germany. It was, and also when I left the airport, it was like 50 degrees Fahrenheit and raining. I'm wearing slippers, which is what we call flip-flops in Hawaii. So my feet were freezing. Even though I took a warm shower and turned on the heat, there was still kind of a chill in my room. And then here was the twin bed. So it reminded me of my mom's home, which was very emotionally and physically cold. So as I'm going to bed, I just felt super emotionally unsafe. But as an adult, I'm like, this is just my trauma talking. I need to get a good night's sleep because I have to get up. It wasn't that early. It was like, 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning to catch my flight to Spain in the morning. But so again, my point is I was feeling these feelings of emotionally unsafe because of the twin bed and cold trauma, because of my mom's house. But I was stuffing them down because I didn't want it to disrupt my sleep, and I didn't want it to, like, quote unquote, ruin my trip. So the next day was a new day, and I was trying to pretend the events of the day before didn't happen. So again, I'm stuffing down my feelings. And as I'm boarding the flight to Mallorca, Spain, I realized I hadn't even looked at my boarding pass, because I'm the kind of person, when I book a flight, I choose my seat when I'm purchasing my flight because I'm claustrophobic and I need an aisle seat. But again, there was so much information going on at gate Z18 when that lady was handing me my stuff. I didn't even look at my new boarding pass, and they had assigned me to a middle seat, which I didn't realize till I was boarding the plane, and I felt like it was too late. I probably could have asked, but I just felt like it was too late. So again, I stuffed down my feelings, and I was like coaching myself. It's okay. It's only a 2-hour flight. I had survived a 5-hour flight and an 11-hour flight. I was like, I can handle 2 hours in a middle seat. I was reading on my Kindle. I had downloaded Debbie Gibson's Eternally Electric. I think that's the title. Her new memoir, which if you loved Debbie Gibson in the 80s, I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. It was so nostalgic. But anyway, because I was so engrossed in the book, I was like, all I have to do is re-engross myself in this book for 2 hours and I'll be good. So that was my strategy, and it worked. until the last about 20 minutes of the flight. I think they had just announced that they were going to start descending. And I realized that the entire flight, my arm was resting on gum that was on the armrest. And I was wearing a sleeved shirt, so I had gum all over my sleeve. So for the next 20 minutes, I was like messing around with that to get it off my sleeve, which thankfully it came off because we all know how gum is. But I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, again, it was like such a fluke thing, just like the baggage cart running into the plane. Like, what are the chances of that happening? So we finally make it, or I finally make it to Mallorca, Spain. I took an Uber to the hotel, and I get to the hotel, I'm checking in, and that's when the guy informs me that they have a 24-hour cancellation policy. And even though I was in Germany the night before because of mechanical issues of the airplane, that they still have to charge me for the night that I wasn't there. So that was disappointing. And then he was like, well, I can give you the receipt and you can give it to the airlines. And it's like, United doesn't give a shit. So that was disappointing. But again, I stuffed down my feelings. I'm like, it's just a few $100s. I am not going to let this ruin my vacation. So I settle into my room, and then I do what any island person would do on another island. I went to the beach. And I took a walk along the beach, and as I was walking along the beach, I noticed that a lot of the women were sunbathing topless. And I was like, oh yeah, I forgot. You can do this in Europe. And so I had this weird urge to do it, but then I was like, no, that is way too risque. I can't do it. It didn't really feel safe. But then I was like, but it kind of feels kind of exciting. So I set up a spot on the beach because I had my hotel towel, set up a spot, laid down, and just took off my top and started sunbathing topless. And not only was this a really cool experience because it just felt so liberating, especially after how my trip got off to a bad start. It felt so liberating to just basically do whatever the hell I wanted. But the other really cool thing about it was, even if that were legal to do in America, it wouldn't feel safe. Like at any given beach, there would be some creepy guy in the corner jacking off, probably more than one. And it just wouldn't feel safe. So most women probably wouldn't even be doing it. So the coolest part of this entire experience is that it felt totally safe. No one was being weird. There were men, like ice cream and other like beverage and food vendors walking along the beach, but they weren't like gawking or being weird. And the other beachgoers were totally cool about it. So this was like a really magical moment. It was the first really cool moment of my trip after so many unfortunate circumstances happened, because it was just so liberating. I even went in the ocean with my top off with people around, and it just felt so safe and comfortable. So again, you know, I had these experiences where I wasn't feeling emotionally safe, but then this was the first time that I actually felt safe. So I am going to stop here before going on to part 2, but the lessons extracted from this part of my journey, and I'll go more into this later, is that I wasn't allowing myself to feel my feelings of disappointment. And this is a learned behavior because as a child growing up, whenever I expressed things like disappointment, my mom's favorite go-to responses were things like, well, other people have it worse, or, well, at least you have XYZ. So I never really felt allowed to feel my feelings and have space for my experience, because I was supposed to be in this space of gratitude and, like I was put in a position where it was like selfish and ungrateful if I felt feelings of disappointment. But the truth is, we're human beings and we all have feelings, and it's okay to feel them. It's not okay to stay there, but it's okay to feel them. So in hindsight, I wish I would have processed through my feelings and actually let myself to have the feelings of disappointment. And this did catch up to me in a very bad way, which I will get into in the next part. So stay tuned for part 2, because there is way more to this story. See you next time.